But let me know what you think about all of this, because truly, this is open to interpretation. That's sort of the whole point.
Hello, Professor Wallace. I hope you're doing well. I've been enrolled in your class for quite some time now, and I've enjoyed your lectures quite a bit. However, today I'm here to provide some feedback on one of your recent lectures. Under the name of Chappell Roan is speedrunning her career right now, skull emoji. So you start off the lecture with this statement.
I have heard more think pieces and discourse surrounding this pop star than actual music, and I'm not sure what it is about Chappell specifically that seems to engender such strong reactions in people.
So as a lesbian who's ideologically left, and we will be getting back to this in a minute, and a woman who champions trans rights, I don't think it's that surprising that Chappell Roan does garner the strong reaction. You then critique her usage of the statement that there's problems on both sides, and how this can be misinterpreted.
I don't think there's problems on both sides is a good statement at all. Is it true? Yes, but we're getting into this really tricky territory where when you're in an interview, or even when you're putting out statements on the internet, if you're only thinking about what is true and what you believe, and you're not also thinking about how it can be interpreted, you're really setting yourself up for failure. There's problems on both sides is a talking point that is very popular among people who do not support leftist policies.
So there's problems on both sides has actually become a leftist talking point. We're at a point where people are now arguing if the lesser of two evils has reached a limit, that being genocide. And that genocide is something that is non-negotiable. And a lot of people would rather just vote for a smaller party. And I'd also like to bring up the fact that anyone who is misinterpreting this is probably doing so in bad faith or for controversy, which flows into my next point. Using tweets. That's it, just using tweets.
Chappell Roan is an embarrassment to lesbians. You can't borrow from drag aesthetics and embrace your sexuality and then pretend the party that would criminalize our happiness is the same as the one who protects it. And this tweet has like 56,000 likes, millions of views, and I find it very likely that the millions of people who may have seen it don't know what Chappell actually said, because this person quoted a quote. They're responding to this Twitter account, which only included this part of her statement. I have so many issues with our government in every way, etc. I don't feel pressured to endorse someone. There's problems on both sides. It is extremely unclear from the snippet what problems Chappell is referring to, and frankly, out of context, this just does sound really bad.
Twitter is notorious for promoting content that is controversial in nature. It's never going to promote the most agreed upon consensus. While you bring up the 8 million views, the 50,000 likes are the actual engagement of the tweet. In fact, views were only implemented to kind of persuade people that people weren't leaving Twitter and that the engagement was still existent. We have no idea where or even how views are counted. So 50,000 likes on a tweet, I don't know. I just find that really hard to consider that like actual backlash and not just some kind of hit controversial tweet. Especially when the person is quote tweeting an account called Pop Flop, D'Angelo. Pop flop. They were never going to have any journalistic integrity to begin with. There was no way anything Chappell Roan could have said that wouldn't have been misconstrued. Because at the end of the day, she is a leftist. It's like asking Chappell Roan to censor herself for people who are going to misinterpret her anyways, on purpose. And honestly, if anyone's kind of playing up what we've been seeing lately, I would argue it's kind of you. Next, you bring up Chappell Roan's use of false balances.
Because a good PR person would have realized that Chappell is employing false balance, which is a terminology in media, which Wikipedia describes thusly. False balance, known colloquially as both sidesism, is a media bias in which journalists present an issue as being more balanced between opposing viewpoints than the evidence support. Or to put it slightly more normally, why are we talking in circles about both sides when one side is objectively so much worse?
So while I do agree that Chappell was employing false balance here, we do know that in addition to supporting genocide, that the right tends to limit the rights and liberties of minorities. But the only people who are, again, misunderstanding Chappell Roan are going to be either trolls drumming up controversy, those who are centrist or on the right, or liberals who are obsessed with Kamala. Now, None of these groups are changing how they're voting because of a Chappell Roan quote. So again, why are we asking her to censor herself for people who are not in her audience? Personally, I wish that was the stance you had taken for this video. It would alleviate her stress and allow her to keep making these strong talking points, being pro-trans rights, and keep talking about the genocide in Palestine, because a lot of people I really need that right now. Next, you talk about the communicator's role in delivering a message.
And one of the first things I was told is that the burden of communication falls on the communicator. It's your job to make sure that you're not being misunderstood. Now, there is a huge debate actually about this. You can find people saying this is a myth and communication should be a two-way thing. The audience has a responsibility to be critical about what they're hearing and be open to it. But they're not.
I would argue that it is based on both sides' role, the communicator and the audience, to understand, but I doubt you would disagree with that. You said that in your video. Again, my issue comes with asking Chappell Roan to appeal to audiences who don't care about her message and have no intent of actually listening to her. You then talk about Chappell's frustration in being misinterpreted.
This is just like PR 101. You know what I mean? She could hire almost anybody and they could have gotten her out of this situation.
Now, if you look at the comments underneath her videos, and even yours underneath this video here, a majority of people were saying that not only did they want to keep hearing what she was saying, but they completely understood what she meant off the bat, and that it wasn't complicated. And that they not only understood her message, but wanted her to keep saying what is honestly what the entire world is feeling right now. So again, makes no sense for her to censor herself for people who aren't listening.
A lot of people who express hesitation to want to vote for Kamala Harris, they're doing so because they don't care if Donald Trump gets elected. It's not really a I don't support Vice President Harris thing so much as centrism as enablement for the rise of the right is a real thing that happens. And when people espouse this, you know what they sound like? This. So even though I personally don't think that's what Chappell Roan was doing, it's just absurd how avoidable this would have been if there was somebody telling her, hey, this is probably how it's going to come across.
I'm going to be very serious for a second, D'Angelo. It's disgusting that you think that people who aren't voting for Kamala aren't doing so out of disdain for Kamala, or that they are just centrists. I'm disgusted in your lack of awareness of what the Palestinian genocide means to people. That Kamala's promise to extend our military and her unrelenting alliance to Israel is not something that would bring disdain. It has sickened many and resulted in people not wanting to vote for her. In your Starbucks apology, you mentioned how you didn't mention Palestine because you want to keep your videos lighthearted, and that's a very heavy topic. Well, that's valid. If there are topics where the Palestinian genocide seems kind of integral to the plot, maybe don't talk about them. It's disingenuous at best and disrespectful at worst. I'm not going to sugarcoat it, D'Angelo. The way you circumnavigate talking about Palestine can be very disappointing to a lot of your viewers, and they make it very clear in your comment section. So if there are topics you want to talk about that include the Palestinian genocide, companies affected by boycotting, or artists like Chappell Roan who have been very outspoken about it and it is integral to their character, maybe don't talk about it. So then, Professor Wallace, you shift to saying that you're not tone policing, but communication is a job.
And I know people are going to jump to like, you're tone policing, you're telling women how to speak, you're trying to silence them. Communication is a job. It's just a job. It's one of your jobs when you are a pop star. Objectively, this could have been avoided by thinking harder about what was said. Not because I think her true thoughts need to be filtered, but because, again, miscommunication creates landmines.
I mean, this could be wrong, but it seems that you're kind of seeing the tone that she should have from the aspect of a YouTuber, someone who needs to be palatable to all audiences. This would absolutely limit Chappell's voice. What you want her to say would fundamentally change how she is trying to say it. I would even argue that there is no miscommunication and that her both sides argument is simply one that is being used in leftist spaces right now. And asking her to get a PR team is literally just tone policing, I'm sorry. Then you start to equate your budding centrist views as a young adult with Chappell's clearly left ideology, and that's saying this energy should wait till after the election.
I'm not picking the sides of what we have right now. Yes, one's obviously better than the other, but Jesus Christ, I hope you don't settle for what we have.
When I was first starting to form my own political opinions, aka not the brainwashing I endured growing up in South Central Texas in the religious environment, oof, I think I initially did land at exactly what she's saying here. What I didn't realize is none of this is false, but shouldn't I be compartmentalizing that energy for after the election? And then once we have the less insane administration, that's when you can unleash all the criticism you want. Can and should, by the way.
Okay, so tell me this. If people advocated for change from a public official only after they were sworn in, after they were given office, what change would they have any incentive of implementing? If Kamala were to take office with no pushback, all that would do is set a precedent where genocide is something that can be ignored. Whether you notice it or not, you're arguing to keep the status quo. So then you bring up a really good point that the right does have these policies that are targeting the left and minorities' rights.
But when one of the sides is actually death, like, for real, forcing people to give birth is deadly. Withholding gender-affirming care from people is deadly. Racism is deadly, etc. This isn't a question, it's not an opinion, I'm not exaggerating. Nuance actually is counterproductive when certain things in life are black and white. I was so annoying when I was younger. I'm glad I worked through all of this offline.
The people of Palestine are dying right now, D'Angelo. The people of Lebanon are dying right now. Their right to exist is being stripped from them. I understand you not wanting any potential of the right to win. But for me, personally, I cannot advocate for my rights when it comes at the death of another's. It's also hard to believe that Democrats are this pillar of justice and rights when Kamala is literally justifying for a bigger military and cop cities. Things that would absolutely affect these minority communities and, yes, result in death. So saying that some things truly are black and white can feel very ignorant when the left is having a problem with securing these rights to begin with. And then you bring up having the privilege to look at both sides.
Complaining about both sides, etc. I love nuance. I love, looking at both sides of most issues. But for some people, it's a privilege for there to be multiple sides when the other side of something is their continued existence.
Why is this mentality not granted to the Palestinians and Americans when both sides are guaranteeing them death? Taylor Swift.
I think Taylor Swift's recent endorsement was a great example. She was able to endorse Vice President Harris, and I personally didn't really see anybody saying, oh, you support genocide and you're against marginalized communities because you've made an endorsement. And if they were, it doesn't matter because I don't think Taylor Swift is genocidal or against marginalized communities.
Choosing to compare Chappell Roan to a genocide-ignoring, self-proclaimed feminist whose feminism starts and stops with people who look like her is definitely a choice, D'Angelo. You are literally asking Chappell Roan to act like a highly curated billionaire. A highly curated billionaire whose money is generated from Israel. Not only are there no ethical billionaires, inaction is action when you are someone like Taylor Swift. So you say that you care about her message.
I just don't want to sound like a man saying, Chappell Roan needs to shut up. She's so annoying and she's so mad. Just stop talking, because I promise y'all, this is actually my hyperfixation. I care so much about her message and how it comes across. And I feel like it's so frustrating seeing this missed opportunity when I think it could have been done a lot better.
Yeah, so far you have minimized the role and how her being a pro-trans leftist lesbian affects how she is portrayed in media. Misconstrued leftist and centrist political ideologies multiple times, drummed up controversy over tweets, recommended her to take a page out of Taylor Swift's book, out of all people. And this whole time advocate her to take a page out of a PR team's book instead of telling her to listen to the people who are actually in her audience, who actually understand her and want her to keep saying these things. Then you finally say the thing you should have said from the beginning.
These people are not following you like that. So your only real options are ignore them, which is very much an option here.
While you're just now saying that she should ignore the backlash when they're clearly being obtuse because Twitter, she doesn't need a PR team. She doesn't need to change what she is saying. She needs to pay attention to the people who are actually listening to her. So then you talk about her mental health.
I bring all this up to say, I actually do want Chappell Roan to log off. I want her to stop posting statements, etc. And it's not because I get annoyed by women being angry or asserting their boundaries. It's because I hate seeing somebody do something that seems injurious to their own mental health and then suffering through the fallout of it while a bunch of people are disappointed.
So we don't know the reasons why Chappell actually pulled out of these shows. She's been talking about how stressful blowing up has been since the beginning. Now, I'm sure it might play a part in her mental health, what's been going on with how the media is misinterpreting her, but do I really think that is the reason why she's like, I have to pull these shows? I don't see that as very likely. It's not uncommon for celebrities to pull shows for mental health. And while I do think that's probably an additional reason why that is tolling on her, I don't think a couple of tweets on Twitter is the reason why Chappell Roan is pulling out of these shows. You use this and her fans being disappointed as an example on why she should just log off. Again, I don't think Chappell Roan's experience with fame should be equated with her not being able to handle social media. I don't see why you're advocating for her to appeal to those who are getting under her skin instead of paying attention to the people who want to listen to her. And that would arguably be the best response in this situation. You then bring up more tweets.
I kind of started to just sit there like, am I missing something? I would hate to make a video where I'm like, no, all these women saying that this is wrong are wrong. But I just fundamentally feel like we must have been interpreting the skit differently. But then the biggest tweet I saw was the one where I was just like, okay, hold your horses. This person quote tweeted Bowen as Mudang and said, I don't know, a lot of the Chappell Roan hate lately has been reminding me of the way the media and the public treated Amy Winehouse right until she passed away. Like, I know this is Twitter, and so the more extreme something is, the more clout it's gonna get. But dude, I feel like comparing Bowen Yang in this scenario to the just vitriolic media that was mocking Amy Winehouse's addiction struggles, her health issues. That is really not how I was interpreting that sketch at all.
Hi, Loco. Yeah? You're very quick to call out the questionable nature of the comments and tweets that are being made to SNL. But with Chappell Roan's endorsement, you spent the entire video basically going over centrism and false balances when a majority of people knew exactly what she was saying from the beginning. And again, this is evident in both of your comment sections. So this next part I really do feel like shows kind of the hypocritical aspect of this video most.
I understand people's desire to speak up for Chappell because she represents a lot of things that are very important to talk about. Mental health, boundaries, etc. However, I just don't think that this energy is productive towards that end. I feel like this parasocial relationship has gotten very intense for a very vocal portion of her fan base.
So why was comparing Amy Winehouse's death with the SNL skit an extreme overreaction, but calling Chappell Roan a Republican or an embarrassment to all lesbians not? You spent so much of this video critiquing Chappell Roan's words out of good faith because people are misunderstanding her, and criticize these fans for misunderstanding the SNL skit. What happened to the role of the communicator? What happened with SNL being in charge of dictating how something is heard? Also, I don't personally think Chappell Roan fans were doing too much here. The energy that seems to be coming from these tweets isn't really about Chappell Roan and Bowen Yang, but man attacking woman. I know you thought you ate when you said this next bit.
This person says, you can't blame the audience for misinterpreting your intentions when the bit didn't land. It was just a bad sketch. So my very same criticism for Chappell's statements does apply here. The onus of communication falls on SNL. I mean, in some ways, they did have to know this would happen.
So if your whole point was, oh, see, look, they are the same, see? misunderstanding, author, interpret. Why did you wait so long to bring it up? And why is it just in this last second with the little Reddit post? There is a huge difference between asking someone to make their political views more palatable and critiquing an SNL skit. Choosing to point your energy at Chappell Roan's words and not the outlandish criticism that came from it, but then choosing to look at the criticism that came from the SNL skit and not the critiques that were coming from that is kind of a hypocritical choice. Finally, Professor Wallace summarizes with this statement.
I have only ever put her in the title and thumbnail one other time. And you know what? I am gonna name this video Chappell Roan is speedrunning the end of her career, because if she continues on her current path, this can't last. Obviously, her fan base is getting out of hand, things are affecting her mental health, etc. But this is actually my first career-ending speedrun video where I actually genuinely think she can just stop. I really see a way for her to turn this around by inviting some people on board, linking up with a PR firm, you know what I mean?
He reiterates how she should either have a PR team or log off, despite her fans and her audience clearly enjoying and wanting her to say these things out loud, as well as a common populace who need a celebrity to be unapologetic and outspoken at this time. Between his commentary on his beliefs on that everyone who's not voting for Kamala is doing so because they are centrist, his lack of understanding in Taylor Swift's complacency and genocide, and his circumnavigation of the topic of Palestine, it's pretty easy to say maybe this video probably should have stayed in the drafts. I'd like to thank Chappell Roan. You don't need a PR team. You sure as hell don't need to silence yourself. You need to listen to the people who care about you and understand you, who will, in good faith, tell you when you're wrong and when you're right. Anyone else is not worth listening to, because that is solidarity. Because having people like you saying what everyone else is thinking right now is exactly what we need. Free Palestine.